I never thought the day would come when my own son would turn away from me. I used to imagine him growing up, becoming someone I could be proud of, someone who would always remember where he came from. But life has a way of surprising us in ways we don't expect. It all began on an ordinary afternoon. I was sitting in the kitchen, peeling vegetables for dinner, listening to the distant sounds of laughter from the living room. My son, Omar, was there too, smiling and talking with his wife, Lena. At first, I felt warmth in my chest. I had raised him with love, patience, and care. I had thought that love would be enough to hold our family together forever. Then, something changed. Lena said something that I will never forget. She said, "You should go, mother-in-law. This is our space now." She smiled politely, but I could see the underlying tension in her eyes. I smiled back, trying to mask the sudden sting in my heart. I quietly walked to another room, pretending everything was normal. I remember sitting there, my hands trembling slightly, asking myself, is this really happening? Is my son going to let her words cut the bond we've shared for years? I had always tried to be a good mother. I gave my son everything I could. I stayed up nights when he was sick. I cheered the loudest at every school event. I listened to his problems, wiped his tears, and celebrated every small victory as if it were my own. And yet that day, I realized that love alone could not guarantee a place in someone's heart forever. Omar came in a few minutes later, standing awkwardly by the doorway. "Mom, Lena didn't mean it like that," he said softly, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He didn't say more. He didn't come closer. He didn't hug me the way he used to. And that silence, that small pause, felt louder than any words. I took a deep breath and tried to hold back my emotions. I told myself, it's just a small misunderstanding. Things will be okay. But deep inside, I knew something was changing, something that I could not yet name. I want you to imagine the house we lived in. A small, warm place filled with memories. The kitchen smelled of spices and herbs I had been cooking with for decades. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, highlighting the dust motes in the air. The living room was cozy, with old photographs lining the walls, family trips, birthdays, school events. Every corner of that house held a story. And yet that day, even in that familiar space, I felt like a stranger. Omar had always been close to me. As a child, he would sit on my lap, whispering secrets only I could hear. We shared jokes, small adventures, and quiet moments of understanding. When he was in trouble at school, he was the first one he ran to. And when he achieved something, he would rush to me to share the joy. I thought our bond was unbreakable. But adulthood changes things. Marriage changes things. And suddenly, the world that had once felt so safe and familiar now seemed strange and distant. Lena, his wife, was kind in many ways, but her presence brought a shift I had never anticipated. She was confident, assertive, and sometimes unintentionally dismissive of the role I had played in Omar's life. I remember the nights I would lie awake replaying their words in my mind, asking myself over and over, did I do something wrong? Did I fail as a mother? Every memory of my son, every laugh, every tear we had shared together suddenly felt fragile, like it could shatter with the slightest pressure. One evening, I decided to take a walk outside, just to clear my mind. The air was cool, and a gentle breeze brushed against my face. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the occasional sound of children playing and a dog barking in the distance. I thought about all the moments that had brought me to this point. The sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the endless love. Was it not enough to remain part of his life? I also remembered my husband, who passed away a few years ago. He always used to tell me, family is everything. But sometimes love alone is not enough. People grow in different directions. I had never understood those words fully until now. Returning home, I tried to pretend that everything was fine. I greeted Omar with a soft smile, asked about his day, and even tried to share a laugh. But inside, I felt a storm, a quiet, persistent ache that I could not name. Every interaction felt like walking on thin ice. One wrong move, one misunderstood word, and everything could break. The following days were a careful dance. I tried to stay invisible at times, letting Lena take the lead in conversations. I would cook, clean, and try to be helpful, all while silently hoping that my son would remember the bond we shared, that he would see me not as a stranger in his home, but as the mother who had raised him. And then came small moments that began to hurt more than anything else. A laugh shared between Omar and Lena that I wasn't part of. Decisions made without asking for my opinion. Invitations to family events that arrived too late for me to join. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but slowly the distance grew. I remember one night, sitting alone at the dining table. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the clock. I held a cup of tea in my hands and thought, how did we get here? How did my son, the boy who once clung to me, the boy whose eyes always sought my approval, become so distant? I knew then that life was changing, that my relationship with my son was entering a new chapter, one that I was not sure I was ready for. I felt fear, sadness, and a deep sense of loss, all at once, but beneath it all, there was still love. That love was steady, quiet, and enduring, and that I realized would be my guiding light. No matter what happened, I could choose how I reacted. I could choose patience, empathy, and understanding, even in the face of rejection. I could try to build bridges instead of walls, even when my heart ached. Little did I know that the days ahead would challenge me in ways I had never imagined, that small tensions, small words, and quiet moments of misunderstanding would grow into something I could not ignore, that I would have to face not only my son's choices, but also my own fears, regrets, and hopes. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still quiet. Sunlight streamed softly through the curtains, and I could hear birds chirping outside. I brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window, staring at the garden. I thought about Omar. I thought about Lena. I thought about us, my son, my family, the life we had shared. I knew that I had to be careful. I had to be mindful of every word, every gesture. I couldn't let my feelings show too openly, or it might push them further away. But I also couldn't pretend that nothing had changed. Something had shifted between us, and it wasn't easy to ignore. Later that day, Omar called me into the living room. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes the way it used to. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and sat down across from him. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "I know things have been tense lately. I didn't want to hurt you." I forced a small smile. "I know you didn't. I miss how things used to be." He looked down at his hands. "It's complicated. Lena and we're trying to figure things out. I just want peace at home." I nodded slowly. "I understand. I just hope you remember that I've always been here for you, no matter what." He didn't reply immediately. He looked away, and in that silence, I felt a pang in my heart. I realized that love alone might not be enough to keep the closeness we once had. I also realized that I needed to find a new way to connect with him, one that respected his choices but didn't erase our bond. The days that followed were a delicate balance. I would go about my chores, preparing meals, tidying the house, and trying to create moments where we could all come together. But Omar and Lena's relationship seemed to be building walls around me.
Small things began to hurt more than I expected. One afternoon, Omar and Lena were planning a weekend trip. I asked if I could come along, thinking it might be an opportunity to reconnect. Omar looked uncomfortable. "Mom, this trip, it's just the two of us, Lena and I," he said gently. I forced a nod. Of course, I understand. But inside I felt a deep ache. I remembered the countless times I had taken him on trips when he was a child. I had planned everything, packed his favorite snacks, and made sure every moment was special. And now I was being excluded from a part of his life that I had once been central to. That night I sat alone in the kitchen, stirring my tea absent-mindedly. I asked myself, am I losing him? Is this the beginning of a life where he belongs somewhere else and I am left behind? I thought about talking to Lena, trying to build a bridge, but I hesitated. I didn't want to come across as demanding or intrusive. I wanted to be gentle, patient, and understanding. But patience, I realized, can be one of the hardest things to practice when your heart feels rejected. A few weeks later, things took another turn. Omar and Lena had invited a few friends over for dinner. I thought it would be a good opportunity to share a quiet moment with them, maybe a laugh or a small conversation. But as soon as I entered the living room, I felt invisible. Lena greeted me politely, but her attention quickly returned to her friends. Omar smiled at me briefly, then returned to the conversation. I tried to join in, asking questions and making small comments, but I could feel the distance growing. The laughter and jokes didn't include me. The warmth I once felt in this home seemed to be slipping through my fingers. I went to the kitchen to fetch a glass of water, trying to keep my emotions in check. I stood there for a moment, looking at the familiar tiles and countertops, thinking about all the memories we had made in this house. The kitchen had always been my safe place, the heart of the home. And yet even here I felt the emptiness growing. Later that evening, Omar came into the kitchen. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, I know this feels hard. I didn't mean to make you feel left out." "I know, Omar. I miss how things used to be." He looked down at his hands and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I realized then that the life I had known was changing. The boy who had once clung to me, the young man who had shared every secret and every dream, was becoming someone else who needed space, who needed to make his own choices. And I had to find a way to accept that, even if it hurt. The tension began to grow over small things. Conversations became strained, decisions were made without my input, and even little gestures of affection that I had once taken for granted, a hug, a smile, a simple thank you, became rare. I found myself constantly questioning my place in their lives. One rainy evening, I watched Omar and Lena from the kitchen window. They were laughing together, sharing an umbrella as they returned from the market. The scene was simple, ordinary, but to me it was a painful reminder that I was becoming a bystander in my own son's life. I asked myself, did I fail as a mother? Did I push him away somehow? But then I remembered all the love I had given him, all the sacrifices I had made, and all the quiet moments we had shared. I realized that my love was still here, steady and enduring. It was just the expression of that love that needed to change. The first major conflict came one evening when Omar asked me to step aside while he discussed something important with Lena. "Mom, this is private," he said. I nodded, trying to hide my hurt, but inside I felt a storm. The words stung, not because he was telling me the truth, but because the truth made me realize that my presence was no longer as essential as it once was. I felt the distance widening, the bond we had built, slowly stretching, threatening to break. I spent that night reflecting on our life together. I thought about all the small moments that had led to this point. The laughter, the tears, the shared meals, the late-night talks, the comfort of being close. And I realized that while life was changing, love didn't have to end. It could adapt, grow, and find new ways to be expressed. Over the next few days, I tried to find small ways to reconnect. I cooked his favorite meals, left little notes in his room, and tried to create moments of shared laughter. Sometimes it worked. Omar would smile, share a memory, or offer a quiet word of thanks. Other times, I would be met with silence, a polite nod, or the feeling that I was intruding. But despite the challenges, I refused to give up. I reminded myself that love is patient, that relationships are built slowly, and that the bonds we share can survive distance if we nurture them carefully. And yet, I knew that bigger challenges were coming, that the small tensions, the quiet misunderstandings, and the subtle distance were just the beginning of something larger, a turning point that would test my heart and my patience in ways I could not yet imagine.
Days turned into weeks, and I could feel the quiet distance between Omar and me growing stronger. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now carried an undertone of tension. Every glance, every word, seemed to be measured carefully, weighed and considered before being spoken. I tried to be patient, reminding myself that love could endure, but my heart ached with each small exclusion. One evening, Omar was in the living room with Lena, planning a small family gathering for the weekend. I stood nearby, quietly folding laundry, hoping to overhear a few words and maybe join in the conversation. But Lena, sensing my presence, turned to Omar and said softly, "Mom, maybe you should give us space for this one." I nodded, holding back a lump in my throat. "Of course," I whispered. Omar gave me a quick glance, something between guilt and discomfort. "I know it's hard," he said quietly. It was hard. I felt invisible in my own home. I had spent decades nurturing this family, yet here I was, watching them plan a life that seemed to no longer include me in the way it once had. That night I lay in bed thinking about the past. I remembered when Omar was a boy, how he would run into my arms after a bad dream, how he would tell me his secrets, how he would seek my advice for every little thing. And now, those moments felt like memories from another life. I tried to speak with him the next day, hoping for a small connection. "Omar," I said softly, "can we talk for a moment?" He paused, then nodded. "Sure, Mom." I hesitated, searching for the right words. I miss how things used to be. I feel like I'm losing you, and I don't want to. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, I love you. I always will. But things are changing. Lena and we're building our own life now. It doesn't mean I don't care about you." I nodded, trying to understand. But my heart ached. I realized that love alone wasn't enough to keep the closeness we had once shared. There needed to be mutual effort, understanding, and respect for the bonds that had been built over years. A few days later, another moment pushed me further into quiet sadness. Omar had invited a distant relative over for lunch. I had prepared a dish I knew everyone loved, hoping it would bring a smile to Omar's face. But as soon as he saw me carrying the plate, he said, "Mom, just leave it here. Lena will handle the serving." I stopped, feeling the sting of his words. "Of course," I murmured, stepping aside. Later, I watched from the kitchen doorway as Lena served everyone with a cheerful smile. Omar thanked her warmly, laughing at something she said. And I realized that I was becoming more of a background figure, a guest in the home I had built, rather than the mother at its center. I went to my room, sitting by the window, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. I thought about the countless sacrifices I had made, the nights I had stayed awake worrying about him, the times I had gone without so he could have. And now it felt like none of it mattered. The following week brought another subtle but painful moment. Omar had invited a distant relative to a cousin's wedding, and Lena had suggested that he go alone. When he told me, I felt a sharp pang of exclusion.
Mom, I'll be at the wedding with Lena. It's a small ceremony, he said. I nodded, forcing a smile. I see. Have a good time. But inside, I felt a quiet heartbreak. Weddings had always been family events, a time to celebrate together, and yet here I was, left out of a moment that should have been joyful. I spent the evening thinking about how life had shifted so quietly, how small choices and subtle words had accumulated into something much larger, a sense of being replaced, of no longer being essential in my son's life. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered into the living room. Omar was sitting quietly, reading a book. I sat beside him, hesitating before speaking. Omar, I asked softly, do you remember when you were little and you told me your dreams? He looked up, a small smile crossing his face. Of course, Mom. I always told you everything. I miss that, I whispered. I miss feeling close to you, sharing those moments, being part of your life in every way. He closed the book and took a deep breath. Mom, I know. I miss it too, but things are different now. Lena and we're building our own life now. It doesn't mean I don't care about you. I nodded, trying to understand, but my heart ached. I realized that love alone wasn't enough to keep the closeness we had once shared. There needed to be mutual effort, understanding, and respect for the bonds that had been built over years. The tension between us grew not from anger, but from absence. From the quiet feeling that I was no longer at the center of his world. I tried to be patient, understanding, and gentle, but my heart often ached in the stillness of the evenings. One evening, I overheard a conversation that made my chest tighten. Lena was speaking with a neighbor, quietly, almost conspiratorially. I think Mom doesn't understand yet. Omar and I need space, our own routines. She's trying, but sometimes it's a lot, Lena said softly. I stood frozen for a moment, feeling the sting of her words. I wanted to intervene, to explain myself, to tell her that I only wanted to be part of my son's life, but I stayed silent. I didn't want to create conflict. That night, I reflected on everything. I realized that I couldn't control others' choices. I couldn't dictate how my son or his wife felt. All I could do was adjust, find new ways to love, and protect my own heart from despair. The following days brought more small misunderstandings. Omar would forget to mention plans, leave me out of conversations, or make decisions without consulting me. Each instance chipped away at the closeness we had once shared. I began to feel a quiet sense of isolation, even within the walls of my own home. One evening, I tried to speak with Omar directly. Omar, I feel like I'm slipping away from you, I said softly. He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Mom, it's not that I don't want you around. We're trying to build our own life. You know how it is. I know. I just, I wish it didn't have to feel like this. He didn't reply, and the silence hung heavy between us. That night I thought about my husband, who had passed away years ago. He had always warned me that relationships change, that children grow, and that love sometimes requires letting go. I had understood in theory, but living it was another matter. I realized that I was being tested, not by anger or conflict, but by quiet distance and subtle exclusion. And I knew deep down that the most difficult moments were still ahead. The rising tension, the misunderstandings, and the emotional distance would soon lead to a turning point, a moment that would challenge my heart, my patience, and my understanding of what it truly meant to be a mother.
The day everything changed began quietly, almost unnoticeably. It was a Sunday morning, and the house was bathed in soft sunlight. I was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, humming softly to myself. Omar and Lena were upstairs, getting ready for a small outing. I thought it would be an ordinary day, a day like any other. But it wasn't. Later that morning, Omar came into the kitchen, holding a letter in his hand. His face was serious, something I rarely saw these days. He handed it to me without a word. I took the envelope, noticing it was from the bank. My heart skipped a beat. I opened it carefully, and as I read, I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a notice, a transfer of my name from the family house documents. Omar had signed the papers without telling me. The home I had built with my late husband, the house where I had raised my son, was being legally transferred, and I was no longer listed as the primary owner. I looked up at him, my hands trembling. Omar, what is this? He avoided my gaze. Mom, it's just paperwork. Lena and I thought it would be better if we handled things ourselves. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal? I whispered, my voice barely audible. This is my home. Omar, I lived here for decades. Your father and I, we made this place for you, for the family. He shifted uncomfortably. I know, Mom, I understand, but it made things simpler this way. It's not like you're being thrown out. But I don't even know where I stand anymore, I said, my voice shaking. I've tried to be patient, understanding, supportive, and this is how I'm treated? Omar hesitated, clearly struggling to explain. Mom, I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing. But inside, I felt a cold emptiness spreading through me. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It wasn't subtle exclusion. It was a clear choice. A decision that placed Lena's comfort and control above the mother who had given everything. I took a step back, tears welling in my eyes. So this is it? You've chosen her over me? He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. The silence was louder than any words could have been. I spent the rest of the day in quiet shock. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus. Every corner of the house seemed to echo with memories. The laughter of Omar as a child, the quiet talks late at night, the warmth of shared meals and celebrations. And now, everything felt fragile, like it could shatter with a single breath. That evening, I walked through the garden, the soft breeze brushing my face. I thought about my life, my love for my son, and the sacrifices I had made. I asked myself, did I do something wrong? Was I not enough? How did it come to this? I remembered the small signs I ignored, the little exclusions, the subtle dismissals, and the laughter and plans I was no longer part of. They had all been leading to this moment. And now, the reality was undeniable. My son, the boy who once clung to me, the man I had nurtured with my love, had made a choice that left me feeling invisible in my own home. That night, Omar came to my room. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking nervous. Mom, I know you're upset, he said softly. I didn't mean for it to feel like I'm pushing you away. I turned to him, tears streaming down my face. It already feels like that, Omar. It feels like you've chosen her over me, and I don't know how to be part of your life anymore. He reached out, taking my hand gently. Mom, you will always be part of my life, but things have changed. Lena and I, we're building our own family now. I have to respect her feelings too. I pulled my hand away, my heart breaking. I respect her feelings. I respect her as your wife. But I thought that respect would go both ways. I thought my love and sacrifices mattered." He didn't answer. He looked down, the guilt and discomfort visible in his expression. But it wasn't enough to heal the wound inside me. That night, I lay awake, thinking about the years that had led to this moment. I remembered holding Omar as a newborn, comforting him through sickness and tears, cheering at his school events, wiping away his mistakes, celebrating his successes. And now I felt like a stranger in the home I had built, a mother who had been quietly replaced. The next few days were a mixture of silence and forced normalcy. Omar and Lena tried to act as if nothing had happened, but the tension was palpable. I spoke less, stayed in my room more, and tried to process the emotions that churned inside me. I felt hurt, confused, and betrayed. Not in anger, but in a quiet, aching sadness. One afternoon, I overheard Lena talking on the phone. "Yes, we finalized it. Mom won't cause any problems now. It's much simpler this way," she said softly. I froze, my heart sinking. I felt a mix of anger and despair. This wasn't just about paperwork anymore. It was about being deliberately excluded, about a choice that placed me on the outside. I went to my room and sat by the window, staring at the rain falling softly against the glass. I asked myself, how did it come to this? How did my son let this happen? I realized then that the turning point wasn't just the papers or the choice itself. It was the moment I understood that my son's loyalty had shifted, that the bond I thought unbreakable could be tested by life, marriage, and decisions made without me. That evening, I confronted Omar one last time. "Omar, I need to know," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "Do you care about how I feel? Or am I just someone from the past to you now?" He looked at me, eyes full of conflict. "Mom, I care. I always will. But life is different now. I can't live in the past." I shook my head, tears flowing freely. "I never wanted the past. I only wanted a place in your life, in your heart. Is that too much?" He didn't answer. Instead, he left the room quietly, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my pain. That night, I sat quietly in the living room, surrounded by memories and silence. I realized that this moment, this heartbreak, this turning point, was a test of my own strength and patience. I couldn't control Omar's choices. I couldn't dictate how Lena felt or what decisions they made together. All I could do was choose how to respond, how to carry myself, and how to continue loving without losing myself in despair. I decided then that I wouldn't let this moment define me. I wouldn't let my son's choices, however painful, erase the decades of love, care, and guidance I had given. I would find a way to adapt, to continue loving, and to protect my own heart. That night, I cried quietly, not in anger, but in grief. The grief of realizing that life changes, that relationships evolve, and that love sometimes requires letting go of expectations. The days after the turning point were heavy with quiet sadness. The house felt different. Even the familiar sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, the soft rustle of leaves outside, seemed to echo my loneliness. I moved through the rooms, performing my daily chores, but my heart felt as if it were walking through a fog. I realized that the sharp sting of betrayal had softened into a dull ache, a constant reminder of the shift in my family. I spent hours reflecting on the past, the sacrifices I had made, the love I had given, and the countless moments I had shared with Omar. I understood now that the pain wasn't just about exclusion. It was about the realization that relationships evolve, sometimes in ways we cannot control. One afternoon, I decided to sit quietly in the living room near the old photographs lining the walls. I ran my fingers over a picture of Omar as a little boy, sitting on my lap, his eyes full of trust and laughter. I remembered the bedtime stories, the shared secrets, the nights I stayed awake while he slept peacefully, knowing he was safe. Those memories were mine forever, unshaken by time or circumstance. I began to see that my love for Omar didn't have to depend on constant closeness or approval. Love could be patient, quiet, and enduring. It could survive distance and still remain strong. I understood that while I could not control his choices, I could control my own reactions, my own strength, and the way I nurtured my heart. The next step was acceptance. I reminded myself that Omar's life was changing. As he grew older, his responsibilities, priorities, and relationships would shift. Lena was a part of his life now, and I had to respect that. I also realized that my own happiness could not be solely tied to his choices. I needed to find joy in the small moments, in memories, in the love that still remained. One morning, I invited Omar to have tea with me. It was a simple gesture, but one I hoped could open a path for calm conversation. "Omar," I said softly, pouring the tea, "I want us to find a way to be close again, even if things have changed." He looked at me, hesitant but relieved. "I'd like that, Mom. I've missed this. Missed talking with you." We sat together in silence for a while, sipping the tea, feeling the warmth of each other's presence. No words were necessary to acknowledge the hurt. It was understood. But the quiet comfort of being together again, even in small ways, reminded me that bonds could adapt and endure if nurtured patiently. In the following weeks, I began to focus on small gestures to maintain connection without imposing. I left little notes for Omar, simple messages of encouragement or reminders of shared memories. I cooked meals that he loved, but I no longer waited for acknowledgement. I learned to find satisfaction in my efforts, knowing that love was its own reward, not dependent on recognition. One evening, Omar came into the kitchen unexpectedly. "Mom," he said quietly, "thank you for this. It reminds me of home, of us." I smiled softly, feeling a gentle warmth spread through my chest. "I just want you to feel safe, Omar. That's all I've ever wanted." He nodded, and we shared a small moment of understanding. No words were needed beyond that. The gesture itself spoke volumes. I also began to reflect on my own feelings. I realized that some of my pain had come from holding on to expectations, expecting Omar to always prioritize me, expecting life to remain as it once was. Letting go of those expectations didn't mean giving up on love. It meant allowing it to grow in a new, flexible form. I started journaling my thoughts, pouring my emotions onto paper. Writing became a way to process grief, to understand my role, and to recognize the love that remained strong despite challenges. Each entry reminded me that I had done my best as a mother, that my love had shaped Omar into the man he was becoming, and that our bond could survive even quiet distance. There were still difficult days, moments when I overheard laughter I wasn't part of, invitations I wasn't included in, or decisions made without my input. Each instance brought a quiet sting, a reminder of the turning point. But instead of allowing anger or resentment to root, I practiced patience. I reminded myself that life was evolving and that my son's love could exist in forms I had not yet recognized. I also found moments of joy in small, unexpected ways. A shared cup of tea with Omar, a quiet conversation about memories, a walk in the garden together. These small moments became anchors, reminding me that love was still present, even if expressed differently. One afternoon,
Omar approached me with a tentative smile. "Mom," he said softly, "Lena and I were talking. We want you to be part of the family dinner this weekend," he said softly. I felt a wave of emotion, a mix of relief and gratitude. "I'd like that very much," I replied, my voice steady despite the tears forming in my eyes. That moment, small as it seemed, was a turning point in itself. It wasn't about control or recognition, it was about mutual understanding, respect, and the quiet rebuilding of connection. I also realized that Lena was part of my son's life, yes, but she wasn't an enemy. She was someone who loved him, cared for him, and had her own role in the family. By letting go of resentment and embracing understanding, I discovered a new sense of peace. It didn't erase the hurt, but it softened its edges, making room for compassion and forgiveness. One evening, we shared a quiet conversation in the kitchen. "Mom," Lena said softly, "I know things have been difficult. I didn't mean to make you feel excluded. I hope we can find a way to get along." I nodded, smiling gently. "I want that too. We can't change the past, but we can work on the present." It was a small step, but it felt significant. The walls that had built up slowly over months were beginning to crumble, replaced by a quiet willingness to understand, respect, and coexist. As the weeks passed, I continued to focus on what mattered: love, patience, and presence. I stopped trying to control situations or force inclusion. Instead, I embraced moments of connection when they appeared, savoring them for the warmth and closeness they offered. I also took time for myself. I revisited old hobbies, spent quiet mornings in the garden, and reflected on my own growth as a person. I realized that while being the mother is a central part of life, it is not the only part. My identity, my strength, and my happiness are my own, and nurturing them allows me to love more fully without fear or expectation. By the time the small family dinner arrived, I felt a quiet sense of peace. The house was filled with laughter, gentle conversation, and shared memories. Omar smiled at me as we sat together, and I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't the same as before, but it was enough, it was real, and it was meaningful. I realized that resolution doesn't always mean returning to how things were. Sometimes it means finding a new way to love, to connect, and to coexist. It means accepting change, embracing growth, and letting go of expectations that can no longer be met. That evening, as I sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the family around me, I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the love that remained, for the small moments of connection, and for the strength I had discovered within myself. The weeks that followed the turning point became a gentle rhythm of understanding and quiet love. I realized that life doesn't always allow us to hold on to the past exactly as we remember it, but it does give us opportunities to shape the present with patience and care. I continued to find joy in small moments: Omar's quiet smile as he shared a memory, Lena's polite conversation that gradually became warmer, and the laughter of the household during shared meals. I began to see these moments as precious, a reminder that love can exist even when life shifts around us. One evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sun set over the garden. The sky glowed with shades of pink and gold, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. I reflected on the journey I had been through: the heartbreak, the feeling of exclusion, the moments of doubt, and the long nights of questioning myself. And I realized something important. Love is not about control, possession, or constant closeness. Love is about patience, understanding, and acceptance. It's about allowing people to grow and change even when it challenges our own expectations. Omar came into the kitchen quietly, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to me with a soft smile. "Mom, thank you," he said, "for everything. I know it hasn't been easy." I smiled back, feeling warmth spread through my chest. "It hasn't, Omar. But we're here now, and that's what matters." We sat together in comfortable silence, sipping our tea and enjoying the moment. It was simple, ordinary, and yet profoundly meaningful. I realized that moments like these were more powerful than grand gestures or words. They were proof that bonds, though tested, could endure. Over time, I learned to let go of the hurt completely. I stopped measuring my worth by the decisions of others. Instead, I focused on the love that remained, the memories I cherished, and the quiet strength I had discovered within myself. I also embraced the presence of Lena in our lives, understanding that she was part of Omar's journey and that acceptance could create harmony rather than conflict. I began to appreciate the beauty in life's quiet rhythms, morning sunlight streaming through the curtains, the sound of rain on the roof, the aroma of a home-cooked meal, and the simple act of sharing a conversation with my son. These small moments became anchors of joy, gratitude, and connection. One afternoon, Omar came to me with a photograph from his childhood, one of him sitting on my lap, smiling brightly. He said, "I found this while cleaning. I wanted you to have it." I took the photo, holding it close. Tears filled my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of love, recognition, and quiet happiness. I realized that while life had changed, the bond we shared remained unbroken. It had simply taken a new form, gentler, calmer, and full of understanding. I also took time for myself, reconnecting with old hobbies and small pleasures. I tended the garden, read books I had long put aside, and spent quiet mornings reflecting on life. In doing so, I discovered that nurturing my own heart allowed me to give love freely, without fear or expectation. I was still a mother, still loved, still part of Omar's life, but I was whole on my own. The house no longer felt like a place of tension. It was filled with warmth, shared stories, laughter, and quiet understanding. I realized that reconciliation and peace are not always dramatic or sudden. Often they come quietly, like sunlight after rain. Looking back, I understood the lesson life had offered me. Relationships evolve, love endures, and patience is a form of strength. I had learned that it's possible to love deeply without being consumed by hurt, to let go without losing hope, and to embrace change without abandoning the past. I also realized that forgiveness, both for others and for myself, is a gift. It allows the heart to heal, the soul to breathe, and the bonds of family to be rebuilt, even if in new and unexpected ways. That evening, as Omar and Lena prepared dinner together, I watched them with a quiet smile. I felt gratitude for the journey we had shared, the struggles, the misunderstandings, and the moments of pain, because they had led to growth, understanding, and a deeper appreciation for one another. I knew that life would continue to present challenges. There would be moments of tension, misunderstandings, or distance, but I also knew that with patience, love, and empathy, we could face them together. I went to my room, sat by the window, and whispered softly to myself, "Life is never perfect, but love endures, and that is enough." The final days of the story were filled with quiet warmth. Omar would occasionally sit with me to share a story, Lena would greet me with kindness and small gestures of care, and I found joy in the simple act of being present. I realized that motherhood, like love, is a journey of adaptation, understanding, and acceptance. I no longer feared being left out or forgotten. Instead, I embraced each moment of connection as a gift, knowing that love cannot always be measured by proximity or constant attention. It can survive distance, evolve over time, and continue to shape hearts quietly and steadily. As the sun set over our home, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had faced heartbreak, confusion, and feelings of rejection. I had learned to navigate the changing tides of relationships, and I had discovered a quiet strength within myself. I understood that life is not about holding on to the past or trying to control the choices of others. It is about cherishing what remains, nurturing the bonds we have, and finding joy in the moments that matter most. And most importantly, I realized that love, patient, quiet, enduring love, is always enough. Final reflection or moral.